of the buzzwords I've been hearing around here a lot lately is people talking about DMRs, or designated marksman rifles. I guess a lot of people fancy themselves to be something of a marksman, so this sort of gives them an opportunity to show off their skills. So I thought this week we'd talk about exactly what is a DMR and how does it apply to airsoft. So first of all, what is a designated marksman? Well, in the military, it's a term that they've come to describe a guy that's a better shooter than your average infantryman. Your average infantry soldier is going to be engaging targets maybe out to a range of around 200 yards maximum, but not quite as good as a sniper who's going to engage targets out to a range of over 1,000 yards. A designated marksman is generally going to be concerned with targets in the 250 to 550 range average. Now you have to consider in the airsoft world, you're only going to be engaging targets that are a fraction of that distance away. I'd say your average guy with a carbine is probably going to be engaging targets out to maybe 50 yards maximum, while your snipers are probably going to be hitting targets somewhere in the 100 to 150 yard range. So I think it's a normal expectation to have the DMR guys to be hitting targets somewhere between 50 and 100 yards. Now I know a lot of you guys out there can hit targets beyond 100 yards with your airsoft gun, but let's talk about the average guy with an airsoft gun. I think it's a pretty good expectation to have him hit something between 50, 75, or 100 yards. Now, I know a lot of you guys can hit targets out beyond that, but that's a pretty good shot. If you can hit something with a smoothbore airsoft gun out beyond 100 yards, you're either a really good shot or you got really good equipment, or both. So first off, what exactly is a designated marksman rifle? Well, number one, it has to be a rifle. This here is an M4 carbine, which is a much shorter barrel than the standard M16 rifle, which has about a 20-inch barrel. So you can see when you put the two together, the M4 is at least 4 to 6 inches shorter than the M16. So this is going to give you much longer range and better accuracy than your average carbine. So number one, if you're going to be a DMR, you need to go out and get yourself a rifle. The next requirement for a DMR is to have some sort of optics attached to the rifle. Now this is where I'm a little bit on the fence as far as the airsoft world versus the real world. In the real world, where you're dealing with targets that are between 250 and 550 yards, you're going to probably want to have a telescopic sight in order to hit your target pretty accurately. In the airsoft world, where you're hitting targets between 50 and 100 yards, I really think that a telescopic sight is a bit of overkill. So it's my opinion that you could get away with using just a standard non-magnified red dot sight or a holographic sight and do quite well as a designated marksman in the airsoft world. If you want to look authentic and look like you actually have a DMR, you're probably going to want to go ahead and get a telescopic sight for your gun. And if you want to get really crazy with it, get one that has a variable zoom on it so that you can widen out when you're dealing with targets that are a little bit closer in. The next requirement for a DMR is that it have some sort of folding bipod system on it to stabilize the rifle. We have here an M16A1, which does not have a standard rail system on it. If you were looking at like an A3 or an A4, a lot of those have rails built into the handguards on it. In this case, we're dealing with an A1, so we just use a bolt-on system that simply bolts onto the barrel and allows us to add a folding bipod onto it for making longer range shots. Another obvious choice for the DMR role is the M14 battle rifle, which is one of my personal favorites. Now this gives you the same options as an M16 where you can add bipods and optics and so on, but it's a little bit of a heavier gun. So some of you smaller guys are going to feel a little more encumbered trying to run around the battlefield with something that's heavy. But if you can stand the weight, it actually, in my opinion, gives you a little bit better accuracy because it feels a little more stable to me. Now I know you can get better accuracy with some of the bolt action rifles that are out there, but those are pretty much limited to the sniper role. In the DMR role, we're only dealing with semi-automatic and fully automatic weapons, which in my opinion makes the M14 the obvious choice. You can also build your own DMR by converting an M4 into a DMR rifle. So how do you do that? Well, the problem with most M4s is that the barrels are limited to about a 16-inch barrel, so the barrels aren't quite long enough to be as accurate as a DMR. In this case, we added a silencer to the end of it to cover up the fact that we've actually got an extended tight bore barrel on the end of this. So this has the same length barrel as an M16, but in an M4 package. And all we simply do is just put the silencer on it to be some sort of a shroud to cover up the barrel, so this looks like a standard M4 with a silencer on it. Couple that with the folding bipod and the optics, turns this into a great DMR rifle. So that's the basics on DMRs, and remember, having the equipment is only going to get you half the way there. In order to be a designated marksman, you actually have to be able to hit your target out at those longer ranges. So once you get your equipment, make sure you put in some practice time with it. Otherwise, you're not going to be a designated marksman. You're just going to be a guy with an unusually long rifle that can't hit his targets. So if you got more questions about DMRs, or you want to look into building one for yourself, feel free to stop by the showroom. We'll sit down with you and get you exactly what you need the first time. Or check out our new web address at replayairsoft.com. So until the next time, we'll see you again.